SEC schedule released last evening. We knew that LSU was going to open against Mississippi State. And what we now know is what the full schedule looks like after it was announced last evening. Tigers will, in fact, open up against Mississippi State. And the rest of the slate, I think, is favorable for LSU. That's actually the same word that Ed Ogeron used today when he described the schedule on a Zoom teleconference with the media. But as we mentioned, Mississippi State to open, road game against Vanderbilt, and then October the 10th at home against Missouri. So we already know opening week line, LSU 18.5-point favorite against Mississippi State. So even for all the reasons I discussed yesterday why I like the Mississippi State opener, first game of the Mike Leach era, Bo Pelini back at LSU. How does that transition to the 4-3 do? How does it look against Mississippi State? Brennan's first game, KJ Costello's first game as a grad transfer from Stanford. You have so much intrigue, defending national champions, so much intrigue and storyline in that game. LSU is going to win the game, but it's a really cool way to start the season. And then you get Vandy and Missouri. What the SEC did was basically give LSU the tune-up period. How most teams spend September, maybe playing that one marquee non-conference game, but really you're talking about a bunch of layups before you get into conference play. Effectively, that's what the SEC gave LSU. Here's State, Vandy, and Missouri to get your sea legs under you. We know it's kind of been an awkward offseason. Figure it out here over the first 3 weeks and then go to Florida, and let's see how that works. So after Mississippi State, Vandy, Missouri, LSU's at Florida, home against South Carolina, and at Auburn. By far the most difficult stretch of LSU's season is that 3-game stretch right there. You go at Florida, home against Carolina, at Auburn. I do like that you've got the 3-week ramp up before you go to Florida. I like that you come off of the Florida game with a home game against SC where you'll be favored. And you do get that home game against SC before you have to go to Auburn. But again, 2 road games, Florida, Auburn in 3 weeks. That's a brutal stretch, but I think it's manageable. After Auburn, LSU gets the bye before they're home against Alabama on November the 14th. So the Bama game pushed back a week from November the 7th to November the 14th, but both LSU and Bama get their bye before that game on November the 14th in Baton Rouge. The thing that I hated about the previous schedule was how November looked for LSU. Hated that it was 4 straight conference games. Well, it doesn't matter now because they're all conference games. But it was 4 straight conference games that included Bama and road games against Auburn and Texas A&M to finish. That was a brutal way to finish the schedule. This is a more manageable 4-game stretch after your bye to finish. You've still got Alabama coming off the bye. Then you go to Arkansas, which is going to be a terrible football team this year. You've got to go to Texas A&M. And then you're home against Ole Miss. So, yes, you have back-to-back road games, Arkansas and A&M, but that's a much more manageable back-to-back road games swing than going to Auburn and to A&M to finish the schedule. I'd rather to Arkansas, to A&M, and then finish up at home against Ole Miss. So, all in all, I think LSU got a good draw. It's hard to argue to the contrary. The other thing that's obvious is it wasn't just LSU. It's really all of the contenders that the SEC kind of gave that, I'll call it a tune-up period. Call it whatever you want, but gave them that opportunity to dip their toe in the water. Alabama opens at Missouri, home against A&M, then at Ole Miss before playing Georgia. So the same week that LSU and Florida play, Bama and Georgia play. That's week 4. So all of the contenders are there in week 4 after sort of a 3-week tune-up. Georgia's tune-up is a little more intense. They're at Arkansas, but then they're home against Auburn, home against Tennessee. Then they play Bama. That's a 3rd straight really tough SEC game in a row. So I think A&M has a brutal slate. One of the things that when we talked about with the previous schedule that we really liked about A&M and about Florida was the schedule played out well for a veteran team. A&M this year, though, they pick up Florida, and now when you look at the first month of the season, A&M opens with Vandy, and then they've got to go to Bama, home against Florida, at Mississippi State. I mean, whereas we legit could have been talking about Texas A&M if they had gotten past, in their previous schedule, if they had gotten past Auburn, they legitimately could have gotten to the final 2 weeks of the season at 10-0 with home games against Bama and LSU. And it's like, all right, let's see if you're ready. This is brutal. Week 2 at Bama. And then home against Florida. State, open date, Arkansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and then the brutal finish still. Home against LSU, at Auburn. So A&M certainly didn't get done any favors with the way that their schedule lays out. I like what the SEC did there. They did their best interspersing the open dates over a 3-week period. Everybody's open date is either the 6th, 7th, or 8th week of the season. I'm sorry, the 5th, 6th, or 7th. 5th, 6th, or 7th week of the season. So I like that. Everybody plays 10 games over 11 weeks with December the 12th as an open date as well before the championship on the 19th, which gives you a buffer if you need to make up a game there in advance of the SEC championship game. I like how the SEC laid it out. One of the really perplexing things, though, and if you ever wondered just how intense it really is playing in the SEC, oddsmaker betonline.ag has set the regular season win totals for all 14 SEC teams, and they project none to go undefeated, and they project none to have one loss. This is staggering from BetOnline. Now, I've seen other odds makers. OddsShark has Bama at 9, Georgia at 8.5, LSU at 8. But I'm looking here at BetOnline, regular season win totals for the 14 SEC teams. And BetOnline has Alabama over under 7.5. They're basically saying Bama's either going to be 8-2 or 7-3. They got Georgia and Florida at 7 and LSU at 6.5. Same as A&M, 6.5. I will be fascinated to see if this holds. For what it's worth, OddsShark has LSU at 8, but BetOnline has LSU at 6.5, meaning they're projecting 6-4, 7-3. You ever wondered the sincerity of trying to play an all SEC schedule, 10 conference games, and how difficult it is to manage that type of a stretch, even if you're going to be with limited or no fans? There you have it right there. Odds makers out in Vegas don't build big, shiny buildings because they make a habit of being wrong. That is fascinating to see those numbers play out. Buckle up, y'all. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but it's going to be an awful lot of fun. We got the SEC schedule released, and we're going to be playing football in the Southeast in a little more than a month from right now. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.